All right. Hello, everyone. Let's get started. Thank you so much for signing up for the entrepreneurship um, skill workshop, and thank you for tuning in. Welcome to my main cave in my basement. We'll start right away. I'm recording this session for people who are maybe coming in late, and I know a couple of people are going to Calgary for another meeting, so this will be available for them. We do have, I think, a strong cohort, and many of you are working in similar fields. So I'm quite excited to work with you. I'll just start today and then go through a quick interview, and then we can get into to know each other a bit more. So really, I want to welcome you, and then the reason why we support entrepreneurship in this college and then in the endeavor we do is to encourage creativity, and then to do the mantra our college is saying, we want to develop the engineers the world needs. We do believe all of you have the capability to change the world. Sometimes we think Saskatchewan, we're kind of in the center of Canada, we're a smaller province in terms of population and resources, so we don't think about too much. But these are just selected some entrepreneurial success coming out of this university, and actually most of them are born out of the student initiatives, just like you, instead of actually commercializing the university-based technology. So we want to be here to actually incorporate that skill set to help you to be successful. You probably have been thinking about entrepreneurship and doing a lot of work on your own. You're more committed. I applaud you for that. You probably know that entrepreneur is equivalent with someone doing innovation, working on business, and more risk-taking or risk-tolerant. And if you go to some people who are successful entrepreneurs, they may tell you that they're born with that. So you're either a born entrepreneur or you're not one. I think that's not the case. I myself had the opportunity to be an entrepreneur as a student and later on in life as well. And I wouldn't say myself was born one. If you don't know me, this is where I jump in and tell you about me. I'm Tate Tsao. I'm the board chair in the College of Engineering to support entrepreneurship. Why I do this job is really because we believe entrepreneurship is a craft that can be taught. Anytime if you see an investor, they tell you entrepreneurship cannot be taught, it's something you're born with, you either have it or not. I often ask them a question. So when you go out there, do you invest in someone who have failed and then later on be successful? And or do you actually invest in some people who haven't done it before? And then they often say, oh yeah, like we'll invest in someone who's done it and be successful. That means really they believe it can be taught. People learn that through the experience. And so that's what we're trying to do here. Entrepreneurship in many ways is like a craft. It's easy to learn, but hard to master. I cannot guarantee you success, but there are first principles existing that I would be able to teach you that I wish I had known when I went on my entrepreneurship journey and then fall face flat. So that's what we're doing here. If you think about it, we also have entrepreneurs who can do something new and unproven, and you can have fun and enjoy doing it. But it's not just about innovation or having fun, because if we do that, then the entrepreneurship ground is actually a playground. We want to make sure you actually achieve success. So entrepreneurs are really in many ways like the parrots. You want to raise the sea and then be free and then go everywhere. And you also need to have the discipline like a Navy SEAL that you can actually execute what you design to do and actually make a difference. Oftentimes, if it's not the idea how that original that is make a difference, but your discipline, your execution skills. So what we want to do is to protect your spirit, to nurture your creativity, develop perseverance in you, especially in terms of today when COVID hits, there are more disruption out there than there are opportunity, but that creates opportunity for you to do something. We also believe there are skills and first principles you can learn and help you to do it. What that means is I follow this systematic approach. It was open sourcely created by a leader called Bill Olet. He created this 24 steps out of MIT. And since they start using this program for the last 10 years, the company come out of MIT, created by undergraduate students solely on their own creation, not by their university IP, had equivalent of GDP of Russia, the rank about 9th in the world. What we want to do here is to teach those skills to you, and so you go out and do a lot of hard work throughout this week and for the time beyond. So you use a rigorous process and actually become successful as well. So what do you think are the single one sufficient condition for successful business? This is where oftentimes, especially engineers get trickled. We got to have a product, right? But it's not. You heard about this before. It's really about your customer. Remember, without a customer, you have a research project, you have a hobby, you have a rebellious playground, but you have to be able to make that sell. So many of you know the importance of talking to customers in engineering design class. What that is doing is try to find a problem, solution fit, or product market fit. So that means you have a good start already. You know the customer wanted, you solve the real problem, you can go. But the problem is, oftentimes engineers will go out to the world and find out that it's not enough. And we learn the hard ways as you actually go out realizing the things we don't care about as engineers make the most difference. So you got to actually be able to understand who are the people actually using your product, who are the people making decision to buy them, what are all the influences affect that. So that's your sales channel. You have to be able to manage that and then push your product out to make a difference. You also need to be able to organize production and then increase your capacity continuously as you're looking for growth. Without those two sides, you are very isolated and limited in what you can do. And that's really what we're trying to address here. Our goal for this week is to address these top risks. We want to help you to address risk on lack of product market fit. We want to address the risk of cash flow woes. A lot of times we don't think about that, but what's the CEO's #1 job? It's actually not getting the team done. It's not even get the good product or figure out the best solution. The CEO has to be able to keep the door open, and so then you have to be able to pay the bills. We need to talk about that. And then how do you form and continue a STAR team? With this, we will actually have opportunity to introduce you to some of the colleagues and students, so then you can join each other and work together alongside with each other. Today is our day 1, so you actually have 4 speakers, including myself, Joe Fry, and Sean Mao. You maybe recognize both of them. They both come from the School of Professional Development. Great resources on engineering design and team dynamic. Joe Gill is a lawyer that's specifically supporting early stage startup companies. He will give us a basic consideration of what you need to think about in terms of setting up your company. Tomorrow, you'll have me talking about the customer side. How do you actually get information from them, help you actually focus a little bit more. And you also have a panel of really experienced founders and entrepreneurs, and in larger enterprise will tell you how their process are going and how can you actually go into a new industry you may not have connection and actually find out more information. On day 3, myself and Lee Swanson will actually talk about how do you handle money and deal with that, and then how you handle your pitch. And then we'll have actually an investor panel. They range from early stage angel investment to late stage VC investment and some government support. We want to give you an overview of what's available to you and what you can do from here. You will also probably need to do a lot of work after the sessions during the day to make some phone calls, trying to practice what you learn here and get your pitch deck in order in that way. On Thursday, there will be no formal session, but we will have a preliminary round pitch. So then we'll help you get ready. And there is an optional speaker. She's a colleague from MIT Sloan School of Management. She'll talk from 5:30 to 6:30. If you're interested, email me or send me a message in Slack channel. I'll send you the link so then you can be part of that conversation. They actually teach and practice the same principle we are teaching here. And you'll hear more and have opportunity to ask them how they actually apply those. For the Friday, for some of you like who will make to the round, there'll be 5 judges. It's not too early to start. Like go on to LinkedIn and look at their profiles. They will be from like entrepreneurial sector, from investment, from university, and larger company. All of them are quite passionate about helping the entrepreneurship initiative in this college and in this university. They will become resources for you as well. For many of you, this is quite interesting. So you will have opportunity to work hard to form a pitch deck, as I have sent you some resources on Sunday. We'll go through this week. What we want to do is actually help you fill in the blank, but you will need to draw your previous experience and actually probably work a little bit hard between classes, make some phone calls and get some primary data to form a great pitch deck as well. You might want to meet with some people is working in the same direction with you. And if you can combine, you will have a greater odds to move into the pitch competition, and the experience you gain will be more valuable than the actual money you win. 7 teams will be able to progress into the pitch night, so there's a pretty decent odds. And the premier round will be between 7 and 9. I'll give more information as we progress to that. So now I want to open the questions. Do you have any questions with regard to the logistics to this week? And then now we can actually go into introduction a little bit. If you have any questions, please unmute yourself and introduce who you are, and then we can go from there.
Actually, I have a question here, Tate. This is Andrew speaking.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you speak a little bit to how the preliminary pitch round on Thursday is going to work? Like, is it are we going to be giving the same pitch that we might be planning to give on Friday, or is there some alternative way that we're going to be selecting teams to go on to Friday's pitch round?
Yeah. So for that part, you are doing the similar pitch you're planning to do on Friday. What you need to do is to show us that you have well researched and thought about the customer risks and some of the financial issues. And you want to be able to actually try as much as possible in 10 minutes time frame, convince us you are a team solving a real problem, there is a market, and you can actually capture the value in that market. We'll talk about this like later on, but my rule of thumb is I know you've done good work and focused market basically when you're targeting between a 5 to 20 million total market size. Typically, when people come in and say they have $1 billion market, that means that they are not able to actually segment the market in detail enough, so that their effort is often not focused. So what we'll do is by Wednesday night, I'll actually give you more information in summarize how you do that pitch, and then you'll have the day on Thursday to work on that, and then present it on Thursday night.
Oh, okay, I see. Thank you so much. That answers a lot of my questions. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, I think. Sorry, I realized a few people have not come in yet. I'm just gonna send them a quick message on that. Any other questions from the group? Okay, so our next speaker is actually Joe Fry. He's here. Joe?
I am here.
Hey, I think we have a few people actually having some trouble logging in right now.
Okay.
I think what I would like to do is actually to have people maybe starting to introduce themselves a little bit, so then we all know each other somewhat, um, and then hopefully, like in the meanwhile, like everyone else can join us. Would you like to take over and then facilitate that self-introduction part?
I can do that. Would you like to do the breakout rooms or something more altogether?
Maybe like at this stage, just all together.
Sure. All right. So hopefully everybody's got microphone set up and the ability to unmute. So we can just maybe go through the list quickly, and if you'd like to unmute and just give a quick introduction of yourself and maybe why you're here, what you hope to get out of the week, that would be great. And just as an example, I'll start. I'm Joel Fry from the Ron and Jane Graham School of Professional Development, and Tate was nice enough to introduce me and bring me on this week to get to talk to you a little bit about building teams, which is one of my passions. So I know Andrew spoke and I saw him unmute and he's next in my list. So Andrew, can I pick on you to maybe introduce yourself quickly?
Absolutely, Joel. Maybe here I'll turn on my camera too so everyone can see my beautiful face here as well.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, so my name's Andrew Talind. I'm a recent mechanical engineering grad from the U of S, graduated in May. And I'm joining this workshop today in kind of an effort to flex some of my entrepreneurial muscles and learn some things that I haven't quite learned before. I'm kind of joining alongside a team of I see two of them here today, but we started working on a surgical device back in May, doing some initial research. So we kind of have a little bit of a team together, and we think we have a good idea. So we're here to learn a little bit more about how we can bring that to fruition. So I'm really looking forward to meeting everybody, and yeah, that's me.
Very cool. Thank you, Andrew. So Tate, do we want to keep going down the list, or how do you want to do this?
I think that's a good plan. Like I think we have a couple of minutes, so why don't we do that?
Sure. Okay, so next on my list anyway is Chow. So if you're able, if you'd like to unmute and just introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
We've got you.
Yeah, it's great to participate this workshop. I am a grad student in biological engineering. I look forward to learn about how to identify the market, like to show off the product specialty so we can find the target customers. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, Chris Friesen is next on my screen.
Sorry, just turn on my camera here. Hey guys, yeah. So I am actually probably one of the odd ones out here. I'm actually a business background myself. I came here with Todd Thorsness. He's kind of the engineering brain, which he's actually not logged in right now. I think he said around 6:30 he would be coming in. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely here to kind of learn and expand, you know, entrepreneurship knowledge. It's always been I guess a passion of mine, and we're coming here with a bit of a startup idea, looking to potentially add a team member, preferably from the chemical engineering background. So again, kind of here to see if that opportunity exists, and again, just kind of learn what you can.
Very cool. Thanks, Chris.
You bet.
All right. So next up on my list is Dawson Bacon.
Hello, can everybody hear me all right?
Perfect.
Yep. All right. I'm Dawson. I am an electrical engineering student and I just finished my third year there. I'm currently on my year of internship and will be coming back to school in 2021. I've been working on a bit of a project for about 5-6 months now along the entrepreneurship space with Jay Shaw, who's also in this meeting, and just came to just increase the skills and meet some good people and try and learn some lessons along the way. So
great.
That's all for me.
Thank you, Dawson. And I can see we're going alphabetical by first name is what I think is happening here. Ethan.
Hi, my name's Ethan Bose. I'm a third-year mechanical engineering student, and I want to just join this program to see what I could learn about startups. I'm really interested in working for one. I don't currently have an idea, so I'm looking to join a group. So yeah, that's about it.
Great. Okay, thank you for that. Freeman is next on my list.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We're good.
Perfect. Hey there, I'm Freeman. I'm in my fourth year of civil engineering. I've been working on an idea for like the last few months with one of my members. I think he'll join here in a bit. Uh, my aim for this workshop is to definitely get some more feedback and get some more information on how I can grow on the business side, apart from just doing research and actually developing the everything else, just actually being able to be in a room with like-minded individuals that can actually help me move to the next step, apart from just the concepts and everything that we've been working on for the last few days here. And hopefully that will be a really good one. Yep, thank you.
Great, that all makes sense to me. Next up, we've got, and I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, is it Gang or Gong? I'm not sure. Oh, you're on mute.
Oh,
there we go.
Gang is my real name. Hey guys, my name is Gang, and I hope I found the right Gang here. So, I'm a PhD student, so I've been working from home since early February, so almost like more than half a year. So right now I'm working on an internship in a MyTax Accelerate program with an industrial partner. So what we do, we have some preliminary like a software package that will help the bridge survey guys come up with a real like a service life prediction and help them schedule the right timing to repair the bridge in terms of cost saving and more effective management. So I'm here to learn more knowledge about entrepreneurship and hope to develop this idea into a business. So I'm really looking forward to it, especially like looking for any like co-founders, potential co-founders, and funding sources. Yeah, just to be happy to be here and see all of you guys.
That's great. Thanks, Gang. That's we got a lot of different ideas here, a lot of different areas. Let's move on to Jay, if we can, quickly.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jay Shaw. I finished third year in computer engineering, and just for the past 4 or 5 months, I've worked on an idea with Dawson Bacon, who went a few minutes ago. And yeah, so from this, I just hope to learn a little bit more about the entrepreneurial space and how to move a product from the product stage to market and grow from there. So I look forward to talking with a lot of you this week.
Great. Thank you, Jay. And let's check in with Khaled, if we can.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Khaled. I'm a PhD student in chemical engineering. So I have an idea of using agricultural residues like straws for making adsorbents that can be used in wastewater treatment. I think it's eco-friendly and cheap alternative for commercial adsorbent like resins or activated carbons. So yeah, I think this workshop will give an opportunity to see is it possible to think about this idea as a product. Yeah, I hope we can think about this idea and find a way to make it feasible for future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Khaled. And Min.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me fine? Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, it's a little quiet, so you might have to speak up just a bit.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is and I'm in third year of engineering physics. So right now I'm in this group called Second Things, and we have a bunch of projects. And like for this workshop, I'm hoping to see ideas and ways to further develop the projects in a way that a student could bring it into and to turn a project into a business and learn more about ideas and whatnot. So I come here with the power of the project, and I'll be willing to join a group or a team and try to learn as much as possible.
Okay, thanks, Min. I didn't catch what your background was. The audio is just cutting out just a little bit.
Okay. So I'm in engineering physics. So
okay. Great, thanks. So an engineering physicist here, so that's awesome. All right, let's go to Mitchell.
Hello, everybody hear me?
You're good.
Excellent. My name is Mitchell. I'm a recent mechanical engineering graduate, and I am a part of the same group as Andrew and Nick, and we've been working on a medical tool for the past couple of months. And I joined this course because it seemed like an excellent opportunity to learn more about entrepreneurship and really take those next steps in our business, hopefully. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Mitchell. And Nicholas.
Hello. So I'm again with the same group as Andrew and Mitch, and basically rinse and repeat what they said. We've been working on a medical device, currently taking it into our GE capstone project, and I've been working with Tate through that as well. Just basically in here to learn a bit more about what it takes to basically grow it in the business space, as well as get some experience with creating like a pitch deck and actually pitching the idea in front of people, and hopefully win some money as well. I mean, that's what everyone's here for. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of what we're all about.
Great. There are prizes? Tate didn't tell me there were prizes. Okay, now I have to rethink this. All right, last one on the list I think I've got is Venu. Again, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everyone. I'm Venu. I'm from chemical engineering. I'm doing a postdoc in chemical and biological engineering department. I've joined this workshop to mainly know on the pathways for commercialization. So I look forward to learn many things from you guys in this week.
Great, thank you very much. So the only other person I jumped over was Sean, but I have a feeling he'll be introducing himself very shortly. So that's great, and there's a cash prize. Well, then I should give my real reason for being here is I'm here to steal all of your ideas and win that money. Unfortunately, as you've described them, they are all way over my head technically, so I guess I can't. But thank you for taking the time to introduce yourselves. I see some people with teams and some people who are looking for teams, so this is going to play right into what I'm going to talk about a little bit later, and I think we've actually saved ourselves some time later, so we can feel free to take a little bit of my time if we need to, Tate, as we move forward. But I will turn it back over to Tate to probably turn it back over to somebody else.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. That was great. I'm quite excited. I think that there are some good collaboration that could happen here. But we are actually overdue. So Sean Mel is here. He's a great colleague, wealth of knowledge on ideation and design. He will actually lead a session on actually examining your business idea and then going there. So without further ado, I'll give you Sean Mel. Sean, the virtual floor is all yours.
Thanks, Tate. Can everybody hear me? And you can post on chat and just say yes to.
Loud and clear, Sean.
Okay, sounds good, Andrew. Good to see a bunch of familiar faces out there during the introductions. Good to see you all. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go through a few slides here this evening. And here we go. All right, so as Tate said, I do work with Tate and Joel. I've actually taught for about 5 years the GE 495, 496 multidisciplinary entrepreneurial capstone course in engineering. and have worked with a lot of students who have gone on to develop small startups and have really been working with 20 or 30 odd groups over the past several years, doing the sorts of projects that you're thinking about doing. Tate asked me tonight to talk to you about ideation. Now, it sounds like some of you already have your idea, which is fine. We can still talk about ideation, but I'm going to maybe do a little bit of backtracking on that in a couple of places to make you maybe try and focus on the problem instead of the solution. So I want to make this a little bit interactive. And my first question to you is, what is ideation? What do you think ideation means, if this is a new word for some of you? And you can just speak up if you want.
I'll maybe jump in here, Sean, because I love this question. I'm going to take a crack at it and say ideation is the formal process of coming up with an idea to a potential problem.
Yeah, that sounds good, Andrew. Indeed, ideation is coming up with ideas. It's nothing too much fancier than that. People sometimes read the word and they think, oh, that must be something complicated. It's just coming up with ideas. And in the context of what we're talking tonight, it's just what you said, Andrew, coming up with ideas to your problems. But I'm going to suggest tonight that you can use ideation for more than that, actually. Now, you're all aspiring tech innovators. And I want to ask something that sort of might seem obvious, but why is ideation important to you as a tech innovator?
I'll jump in on this one. Hi guys, it's Nelson. I would say ideation is important because currently we live in a world that moves so incredibly quick that if you're not coming up with new ideas constantly, not only to get ahead, you get stagnant and you get left behind.
Good one, Nelson. That's a good answer. To be a tech innovator, the nature of innovation is based on basically coming up with new ideas and being creative. So if you really want to be a tech innovator, you are going to have to come up with new ideas, and that is one of the currencies of innovation. So if you're just doing something that somebody else is doing, it's not really an innovation necessarily. And so it's going to be important for you to come up with ideas that other people have not. Now, as Tate knows, I like to push the problem definition portion of the design exercise of the design process. The most important thing you can all do, in my opinion, is clearly understand the problem that you're trying to solve. So your job one is to characterize the problem that you're trying to solve. And that means a deep understanding of your problem. If you start with a solution, that can actually be quite dangerous in terms of your long-term success prospects. You need to understand your problem so that you can actually make sure your solution addresses that problem. And so if you're coming in with what you think is a good solution, I would suggest to you that what you want to do is backtrack a little and make sure that there's a real problem that's being solved, that there are people out there in the world who want it solved and are willing to pay for it to be solved. And then you're on the right track. And you may want to actually revisit whether some other potential solutions might actually be better ones than the one you started with. That happens sometimes. Sometimes we come up with a solution to a problem, but when we go backwards and re-examine the problem, we find that there are other solutions and sometimes there are better ones. So if we're going through the design process, that first stage of problem definition, after we've defined the problem, then we're going to get into ideation and come up with ideas. Now, it's okay if you have some ideas already, but maybe go back and invest in that problem definition. So what should we do to be effective at this stage of ideation? What qualities and behaviors should we exhibit? So if you're going to be a great ideator, if you're going to be a great person at coming up with ideas, what are some qualities that are behaviors that we should exhibit, and what should we do to be effective at this stage? And you can just shout out ideas.
Perhaps open-mindedness and creativity.
Open-mindedness and creativity. Those are two good ones. Thanks, Andrew. What else? We got open-mindedness and creativity. What else? If we're going to be good at ideation, what else do we need besides being creative and open-minded?
It's Freeman here. I can say exploration, being able to find a way to explore different avenues.
Good one, Freeman. That's a good one. So you're willing to explore. Yeah, that's an excellent one. What else? Anybody else?
I'd say maybe being analytical as well, knowing exactly what constraints you're working with, and what your end user is looking for is in return.
Well, that can be helpful, Nelson, but usually that'll be something we factor in later. We don't want to put any filters on at this stage. So when you're doing ideation, you actually, at that specific stage of ideation, you don't want to think about, the restrictions and the constraints and the needs. You're just letting your mind go more freely and less restricted. So actually we would want to be more open. And Chow, that's a good one. Be positive. Yes, we want to be supportive and positive and create lots of new ideas. So here are some behaviors or qualities that can be quite helpful. And a few of these were mentioned. Being open-minded, being non-judgmental. If somebody comes up with a, quote, dumb idea, it could actually lead to something really good. So we're not going to judge at this stage. We're not going to be evaluating the ideas at this stage. We're letting them flow. Along the lines of what Freeman said, he talked about being exploratory, which is a nice way of putting it. The word I have here is being brave. You're not afraid to suggest new ideas, wacky ideas, strange ideas. You have to be brave at this point. Andrew had mentioned being creative. And then there's this point about being uninhibited. Do not let yourself be silenced or even some of this being self-censoring. Let yourself get into the spirit of coming up with new ideas and don't be inhibited to say what comes to mind. Now, you must not be evasive at this stage. That is the number one recipe for squashing good ideation. So, and actually, most people think that means don't be negative, and that's true. But it also means don't be overly positive either. I mean, being positive is good because you're being supportive. But don't be overly positive. Don't say something like, oh, that's the best idea. That's so good. Because then that shuts everybody else down and shuts other ideas down. So, oh, good idea. Or, encourage people, but don't be overly positive because that's also evaluative. Anything goes because strange ideas can lead to good ideas. And some of the best ideas in history start as things that people laughed at. And this gets to something that Andrew was referring to earlier, like you talking about ideation to help solve problems. That's true. We would use ideation for that purpose. But ideation can also be used to help you get ideas that help clarify things, such as your problem, your design objectives, what you're trying to achieve with your design, your design's functions, what your design is supposed to do, and your problem's constraints. So actually, ideation can help with all of these things, not just coming up with solutions to your problem. It can also help you define your problem better. And because the design process is very iterative, you can always be flipping back and forth between problem definition and ideation, and then after that, evaluation of your ideas. You can be circulating through these steps of the design process liberally. And ideation can help not only not only come up with solutions to your problem, but also help clarify your actual problem. So let's talk a moment about creativity, because if you are trying to ideate and come up with ideas, a lot of that depends on your powers of creativity. So here's an interesting one. What is creativity? Anybody want to give it a shot? Who will be brave?
I guess I could take a stab at it. To me, I guess creativity would be looking at a problem and thinking more so outside the box, like looking at inspiration from outside things that could possibly relate to it or not relate to it at all, and kind of draw inspiration almost from outside sources rather than getting too in deep onto one idea.
That sounds good, Nicholas. Thanks. That's good. Any other thoughts on creativity?
I'm resisting my urge to Google it and give you like a Webster's definition of creativity, but I'd echo what Nicholas was saying. Maybe creativity is the process of kind of force fitting things that you wouldn't quite think of when analyzing something in order to help kind of broaden your horizon and broaden the perspective that you're trying to think about when evaluating something or when looking at something that might seem kind of in its own box. Yeah.
You guys are coming up with some excellent ideas about how to be creative and techniques to be creative. Those are really good answers. Anybody else have anything they want to throw in? Min, I know you're out there.
I would say that being having imagination, throw ideas at things.
Sorry, you're gonna have to speak up a bit into your microphone. We're just getting little bits and pieces.
Okay. No, my laptop is very bad at picking up audio. I was just saying that being creative is having imaginations and thinking like in the big pictures and trying to find details, filling in solutions.
Okay, I didn't quite get all that, but it sounded good, but I couldn't quite pick up all of it. Fair enough. I'm going to say that there are actually two types of creativity. There's and the focus in creativity for most cultures around the world is this idea of novelty. Creativity involves novelty. And what's novelty? Novelty is something new. Now, some cultures around the world also have another sort of aspect in it, similar in a way to what Nicholas and Andrew were talking about, is that not only is it new, but it also has to be useful. So it's not enough to just come up with some crazy idea that is of no value. To be creative, you have to come up with something new that is of value. Now, and there's a debate between cultures and different perspectives on creativity of whether that value piece is part of the definition. But the idea of novelty is central everywhere to a definition of creativity. But what I would suggest to you is that there are two fundamental types of creativity that are quite different. And one is divergent novelty, and the other is convergent novelty. Most of you will be familiar with the concept of divergent novelty, which is essentially coming up with lots of new ideas. So when we talk about, oh, that person's creative, they come up with lots of new ideas. That's part of what it means to be creative. And in Western culture, the idea of divergent novelty is a popular conception. But actually, some of the most noteworthy examples of scientific and engineering creativity are actually not examples of divergent novelty. They're examples of convergent novelty. And that is where somebody sees a pattern that nobody else can see. So you think of somebody like Einstein or Newton or Marie Curie or somebody like that who saw a pattern in the world and the cosmos and was able to figure out that there was a simple or relatively simple explanation for everything that they were seeing. And they were able to come up with a new idea, a new concept, a new theory that bound all those facts and observations together. So that's convergent novelty. Now, one other thing you can ask about creativity, is it a skill? Is it a state? Or is it a trait? And how many of you think it's a skill? How many of you think creativity is a skill? You can just say yes on chat if you think it's a skill. Absolutely. Dawson's quite sure about that. Nelson, we got a bunch of people saying it's a skill. Okay, so there seems to be quite a number of people like that. Is creativity a state? Like, you know, I'm feeling creative. I'm in a creative mood today. I'm feeling creative. Can it be a state? Oh, Chow's already moving ahead to trait. Nelson, it can be. Okay. Yes, at the same time. Good point, gang. All right. And then is creativity a trait? Like, for example, are you a creative person? Am I a creative person? Is somebody else we know not a creative person? Is it a trait? Do you think it's a trait? All right. So somebody said it was all of them. And actually, sorry, your name flashed up. I didn't quite get a chance to read it. Who said it was all of them?
That was me.
Okay, good. Mitchell. So I would tend to agree with you. I think creativity is a lot like soccer playing skills. It's a skill, so if you practice it, you can get it. Some days you're a better soccer player than others. You know, you're just in the mood or you're in the zone. And some people are just naturally born better soccer players than others. But it's some combination of all that we can learn to be more creative and we can learn how to be more productive in our creativity. We'll have some days when we're creative and other days when we're not as much. And some of us maybe have a certain level of inherent creativity and others might have more or less. So it can be all three of these, I would suggest. And in the literature on creativity, there are four sort of criteria for evaluating just how creative you are. And those are fluency, flexibility, originality, and elaboration. Fluency means how many ideas can you come up with? Flexibility means how different are those ideas? Originality means how novel are those ideas? And elaboration means, can you really expand on those ideas or are they superficial thoughts? Now, if you've been following along, you might recognize that all four of these criteria really apply to divergent novelty, which is the most popular form of creativity that is studied and examined in the world. So that's something to keep in mind, that we have those aspects to creativity. I would suggest to you, though, that being creative is often a very disciplined activity for adults. In the popular culture, sometimes people think it's a very sort of freewheeling activity with you know, do whatever you want, be free, just let your mind flow or whatever. And that being creative is a very free form activity. And at its very, very highest level of performance, that might be true. But it's often a very highly disciplined activity for adults. And why is that? So take a look at these diagrams here. I thought about creativity when I was doing my PhD in neuroscience many years ago, and came up with this analogy for what I thought was sort of happening in the brain. On the left-hand side, you see a floodplain, very flat. And on the right side, you see the Grand Canyon, basically in the Colorado River. Now, what if ideas were locations on those pictures? So on the floodplain, you'd have an idea on one area, and then there's a different idea on another area, and water needs to connect them. So if water can connect them, you can connect those two ideas. So on a very flat floodplain, if it rains, then all these ideas start connecting. So the rain is kind of like mental stimulation, and we can start putting ideas together because the plane is very flat and ideas can connect very easily. I would suggest to you that the left-hand diagram is like a child's brain analogically, in that they can put ideas together that we do not associate with each other. And children are inherently very, very creative because they don't follow any rules in terms of what is logical or right or wrong. On the right-hand side, we have the Grand, and I would suggest that that's like the adult brain to some extent. Say mine, I'm slightly older. And if we have an idea that's on the left-hand side of this gorge and another one on the right-hand side of the gorge, how are we going to connect these ideas with water? Well, it's going to be hard. We're going to have to do something really dramatic. And I've seen students say, well, we'll blow up the two sides of the gorge, they'll fall into the river, and then they meet there with the water connecting. Or you dam the river, and the river level rises until the water gets up high. Or there's a massive storm and it causes flooding, and the river raises higher. So the bottom line is you have to do something really dramatic in the right-hand scene to get two ideas to connect with water, whereas in the left-hand scene, it's pretty easy. And I would suggest that with adults, we have to do something dramatic to get ideas to go together that don't normally go together. And it's that kind of philosophy that leads us to some different ways of approaching creativity for design, as we'll be doing. One of the techniques that one can learn about is called the Medici effect. Does anybody know who the Medicis were? Any Renaissance Italian scholars in the crowd? Nelson is saying no. Okay, well, the Medicis, and by the way, there's like a TV series on the Medicis. This is what this picture's from. The Medicis were an Italian family, a rich Italian family, in the beginning of the Renaissance, I believe in Florence. And what they did was they would bring the best minds from all the different areas of society together and just bring them together for dinners and discussions and talks. And it was that intermingling of different ideas from different areas that led to some very creative solutions to multidisciplinary problems. So the Medici effect is this idea of bringing together diversity to come up with better solutions. So the best innovators are usually not lone wolves anymore. They associate with people who stimulate their minds in different ways that they're not used to. Remember, we've got to think differently. So it helps to be with people who don't think the same way as you do. Now, here's a list of ideation methods. You can look any of these up and investigate them further if you want after tonight. But at the top, we have reusing, recycling, borrowing, brilliance. That's basically borrowing other people's ideas. I would actually suggest leaving that to the end, that if you really want to be creative, you want to see if you can come up with your own ideas that might be different first instead of going to look for others, because their thoughts will bias your thoughts. Whenever you say ideation, most people think brainstorming. Brainstorming is a method of ideation, but it is not ideation. It's just one method. Morph charts are really powerful. They break your problem into different functions. So you have a design problem, and any solution to your design problem has to do certain things. Maybe it has to do 2 or 3 different things. And you just come up with ideas of what can do each of those things, what can do each of those functions. And then you combine all the possible combinations and you get some very interesting ideas sometimes coming out of morph charts. Force fitting in synectics is forcing things to go together that don't belong. We're going to scamper and verb manipulation is a variation on force fitting in synectics. And then analogy, metaphor, and biomimicry is a way of looking at how do other similar problems solve their situation, and how can that be applied to your situation? Mind mapping is a graphical way of approaching problem solving creatively. And then finally, there's play. And one cannot say enough about play. Play can be very creative and can supply you with insights and new ideas all the time. So tonight we're just going to take a couple of minutes to talk about force fitting in synectics and analogy and metaphor and biomimicry as two techniques that you might want to apply in your ideation efforts. So for force fitting in synectics, basically you review your design problem, you assign a recorder if there's a group of you, because the recorder can be sort of neutral party in this process, just recording what they hear. You brainstorm for 5 or 10 nouns from very different answers, from very different areas, like chair, plane, bookshelf, glass of water, pen, just different nouns. Then force fitting forces you to think of something totally unrelated to your problem, each of those nouns, and relate it to your problem. So you're tasked with the idea of finding a relationship between, say, a pen and a problem. Now, hopefully it won't be obvious what the relationships are. They won't be literal, because you're going to have to think very creatively. You're going to have to get out of your mental ruts and your usual thought patterns to think, okay, how is a pen like my problem? But in looking for those similarities and differences, you will find some things that might be quite useful to you in terms of solving your problem. So how are the noun and your problem related in form and function? What are the similarities and differences? That's what you're trying to do going through this process. So for example, if I asked you to force fit an airport and a dandelion, well, those seem like fairly different things. But dandelions have things that fly out of them. They're called seeds. And a dandelion, a mature dandelion flower, it's got seeds that are going to go flying off. And actually, there's a lot of seeds in a dandelion. And they all seem to take off quite easily and not interfere with each other because they have this sort of spherical arrangement. Now, I don't know if an airport can be a sphere, but what if we collapse the sphere into a circle, and then everything could take off sort of radially out of the hub, as it were. And from that idea leads to packing arrangements for flying objects, i.e. a central hub and traveling to and from an airport and parking at the airport hub. The best packing arrangement is that kind of packing arrangement that we can see three-dimensionally in a dandelion. Now, if we're talking analogy, metaphor, or biomimicry, actually the dandelion was also a good example for that one. Force fitting asks you to try and link two things that don't seem to have much in common, to force your brain to think in a different way by linking things that, quote, don't belong to each other. Analogies ask you to say, a bridge is like a, and then explore the similarities and differences between your problem and whatever it is you're saying is the analogy. So take your design problem and say, it's very much like, and try and find an analogy anywhere. And then think about that analogy and how they solve the problem there. Force fitting and using analogies or metaphors are really two sides of the one coin. And biomimicry is simply finding analogies in nature where we can find really good solutions. So for example, if we look at airplanes, about 10, 20 years ago, the aerospace industry is trying to come up with ways to make the wing shape more energy efficient. And one of the things they did was they added basically fins to the end of the wings, which were similar to the ends of wings of birds. And that led to reduced vortices coming off the tips of the wings and enhanced energy efficiency. And so there was an example of biomimicry. Nature had solved this by the shape of the wings, so we imitated it on our jets. And some of these things, like the wingtips, have been big ideas that have really helped us in technology. So for example, some of you might be familiar with the idea that plant burrs, as you might find out in a forest when you're going for a walk, led to, what did it lead to? What did plant burrs getting stuck on your pants lead to?
Velcro.
Correct, Mitchell? Yeah, you got it. And Jay, you got it? Yep. It led to Velcro. So Velcro was developed by some guy who basically had a lot of annoying plant burrs on his legs and on his pants and on his socks. And he thought, well, these really grip well. I wonder if we could make something commercially that would do this. And after many, many, many prototypes, he came up with Velcro, and it worked. So some final. This is one of my favorites from a Nobel laureate, Albert Szent-Györgyi. Discovery consists of looking at the same thing as everyone else and thinking something different. If you are going to do something novel, creative, and innovative, you are going to have to look at the same thing everybody else is seeing and see something different. That could be either coming up with a new idea, or, as in the case of Newton and Einstein and others, putting together ideas in a new and novel way. But you've got to be seeing something that other people aren't seeing. Pablo Picasso, who you probably all know as a painter, he said every act of creation is first an act of destruction. And you can think of that in terms of, if we are going to think of something in a new way, we have to release ourselves from the way that we think of it. So when I was showing you that Grand Canyon gorge, one of the ways to get the two sides of the gorge together is to blow it up, a true act of destruction. But if we are wanting to be truly creative, we have to deconstruct our current thought processes first. And that's along the lines of what Pablo Picasso was getting at. And finally, from Howard Aiken, who was one of the computing pioneers who worked at IBM in the early days, don't worry about people stealing an idea, because I know some of you are worried about that. If it's original, you'll have to ram it down their throats. I like this quote as I see a lot of young entrepreneurs often think, well, I don't know if I should share my idea with anybody. It's so good, I don't want to lose it. A good idea is vital to launching a good entrepreneurial tech innovation venture. It's vital. But it's also relatively easy to find interesting ideas out there. The harder part is following through on them. So don't focus on protecting your idea, because you actually want to share that with others who will critique it and give you good feedback on it. Honestly, good ideas are often very difficult to introduce to a community, no matter how good they are. So it will be a rare situation where somebody's going to steal your idea. I would instead more encourage you to share your ideas, talk with people, so that you can get good critiques on your ideas, and that'll be much more valuable to you. So ideation can be used, as a bit of a recap here. Ideation can be used to come up with solutions to your problem. It can also be used to come up with different ways of looking at your problem. There are many ways to ideate. We went through a list tonight and took a closer look at 2 of them. And if anybody would like to discuss any of those things further, you can reach out to me. I'd be happy to discuss them with you. But I will leave that with you for now. And I know you have some other things to look at tonight with Tate and Joel as you get into the rest of this startup workshop. Any questions? Alrighty then. So if there are no questions, I'll turn it back over to you, Tate, and I will wish everybody well for the rest of their time here this evening, and hope you have great fun with your ventures and that they're successful. Entrepreneurship's lots of fun. It's also a lot of hard work. I know some of you are already getting into some ventures like Andrew, you and your team. Ciao, thank you. And again, if you want to follow up on anything, just let me know.
Great. Thank you, Sean, for taking the time. And I think we can all say like we really enjoy the conversation. The point for Sean's talk is really to help all of you to think about what's the problem you're trying to solve and what are some best ways to actually help you think more broadly in solving problem. Coming next, I think we have Joe have the breakout room session so that you actually have opportunity to meet with people and talk to each other a bit more. And I think Joe also have a great presentation prepared for us on how to manage team dynamic. One of the things as an engineer, I think both Joe, Sean, and I would agree when you actually go into workplace, oftentimes people are your best friends are engineers and your worst enemies could be engineers who just think slightly different from you. So we want to prepare you to actually work well in a team so that you don't have to spend your time to deal with interpersonal issues, which you will anyway, but we want to equip you with some right tools. So without further ado, I gave that to Joe. Joe, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Tate. So instead of doing the breakout rooms, I think there was a lot of value in going through in the way we had everybody introduced to everybody else. And so for the few who've come in late, we've had people who've shown up with teams, people who are looking to expand their team, and some people who are just looking for a team to begin with. And people were saying we need chemical engineering expertise, and someone saying that I think we have a few chemical engineers here, pretty much everything except I think geo and enviro I've heard for backgrounds, even someone with a business background. So what I'd like to do is just give the 3 or 4 people who joined late the opportunity to turn their mics on and just introduce themselves to the room. And doing the breakout rooms, I was only about 28% sure that was going to work anyway. So we'll just do this, and then I'm going to jump into a little bit of talk about some of the key things to look at when you're building a team. So the few I've noticed coming in that we didn't have an opportunity to speak earlier, I think we had Dylan. So Dylan, if you'd like to just unmute yourself and just give a 30-second introduction to who you are and why you're here, that would be great. Are you with us, Dylan? Do you ever get caught in that situation where a session ends and then you run to the bathroom and you're not there to unmute when you hear people calling your name? I've been there. Well, we'll come back to Dylan in a second. How about Elnaz?
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Elnaz. I'm a grad student. I'm doing mechanical engineering here, and I do have a teammate, and we already have an idea.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much for sharing. We also had, who else joined in here? Again, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Madiyar.
Hi, everyone. That was a good pronunciation. I really liked it. Yeah, it's almost correct and accurate. It's Mahdiar. I'm doing my master's in electrical and computer engineering. And my research interest is deep learning, AI, and machine intelligence. And yeah, it's pretty much all of it.
Great. Thank you very much. And I'm glad I was at least close on the name. And Nelson as well, I think, joined us a little bit later after we introduced ourselves.
Hi there, can you guys hear me clearly?
We're good?
Yeah. My name's Nelson. My background's as an engineering physics student. I have a current startup in the Collabs incubator and innovation place. And yeah, no, the reason I'm here is to kind of like expose myself to the greater, startup community, particularly the student startup community, since it's, at least wasn't as vibrant when I was kind of starting my company. So, yeah.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing, Nelson. And I think that's everyone other than Dylan. So Dylan, if you're able to unmute and just introduce yourself, that would be great. And if not, we can catch you later. I'm not hearing anything. So if you don't mind, Dylan, if you've got an issue with the mute, you can even just type in the chat and let us know what your background is, what you're hoping to get out of this today, this week.
Joe, we're also actually missing 2 people. They're heading to Calgary tonight and doing I think some exam for their work, so they won't be able to introduce themselves. Both are actually from chemical engineering. What I'll ask maybe Dylan and the other 2 people to do is to post, and maybe everyone can, I think everyone should do this, to introduce yourself in the Slack channel so that people who actually weren't able to be here to actually know you, so then that we can get a small community discussion going as well.
Yep, that's a great idea. Thanks for that, Tate. So that's really a big part of building the team, is just meeting people and networking and finding each other. So I'm just going to share my screen here to show you a few slides I've got. I'm somebody who's having worked as a professional engineer, having worked in many different nonprofit organizations. I've seen a lot of teams do really well. I've seen a lot of teams crash and burn, and it kind of became a bit of an obsession to understanding why some teams work and why don't. So I even started my own company looking at this and trying to help people work through this sort of thing. So it's very important for you working on startups or a venture idea. This is a great quote to begin with about the importance of teams. The strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. And I don't know if you've ever fought a wolf one-on-one. I haven't. I almost had to once. And I can say the strength of the wolf is also just the wolf. Wolves are terrifying. But I digress. Hand to paw combat. So revisiting our goals for this workshop, we are looking to really look at minimizing these risks, and a big one is around our team. Teams are a really important part of our success. And when you look at this sort of entrepreneurial cycle, we start with an idea and we immediately need to build a team around that idea and find the people who are going to help us achieve our goals. And as we go through this and perhaps things don't work out and we pivot and we refine our idea, we come back and we may have to build a different team. In fact, it might have been the team that just wasn't right for that opportunity. So it's a dynamic thing. It's something we always have to be thinking about back and forth as we look at our projects. Even this poor man's Charlie Brown here recognizes the importance of teams to the success of an entrepreneurial venture. So the outcome of this short session is to really be able to recognize and reflect upon the important dimensions of forming a strong team. And so there's really 4. There's having a common area of interest, looking at the roles and skills that need to be filled or need to be brought, and team chemistry, that ubiquitous and intangible team chemistry. So this is where we were going to jump out and try some breakout rooms, but again, I don't think it was going to work in WebEx the way I wanted it to. So again, we've done an introduction of the whole room. Hopefully everybody's been taking a few notes saying, I know someone said they were looking for some chem-eng expertise, and we've had some chem-engs talk about their experience and their backgrounds. So hopefully either through the Slack channel or through private chats here, you can start to look at people who have a similar area of interest as you, something they want to achieve, and maybe same expertise that you want to apply and move forward together. So hopefully we're helping to make some connections here tonight. So that's, again, if you don't have a common area of interest, you're not going to be a team. You're not working on the same thing. Now, of course, when we work on any project, we generally have to wear several different hats, right? It can be a hacker or be the artist. But oftentimes we just don't have the skill set necessary to fill that role. And so we have to look for other expertise to come in. And that's where with this forming a team becomes such a necessity, is to find the right people. And it's very important to remember that your background, what you're studying, doesn't necessarily equate to your skill set, and that doesn't necessarily define your role that you have to fill in a group. And so it's often important to think about, as you're making up your resume, what skills do I bring to a team? What can I contribute? But it's equally as important to say, what do I want to get out of this experience in terms of development of skills? A lot of people don't think about it that way. You go to school to learn things, and then you go to work to contribute. But we don't often think about what we're trying to learn on our job or in our venture or in a nonprofit we're working for. So it's important to get out of the silo and just thinking, well, I'm an electrical engineer, so if somebody needs help with circuits, I can do that, but maybe I can't be a leader. Maybe I can't contribute to the financial management, but maybe you can, right? Maybe you have skills from a lot of different areas. So think about the types of skills that you need to fill certain roles, and think about the types of skills you'd like to get out of filling a role. So something to consider is, what is your preferred role? You're generally going to work best when you're comfortable in what you're doing. So do you naturally gravitate towards leadership? Do you like to be a project manager? Do you like to be the technical expert? Maybe, and to be honest with yourself, you prefer to be in a role where it's quite well defined. Someone is giving you tasks to do and you're just churning out deliverables. And that's something you need to understand about yourself. What do you prefer to do, and where are you most comfortable? And again, what skills do you have to contribute, and what skills are you looking to gain from this? So something I noticed when I came out of engineering, I started getting involved with nonprofits and actually in healthcare, and they didn't need an engineer. So I said, what skills do I bring to the table that are transferable from engineering that I can apply? And I said, well, I'm good with Excel, I'm good with numbers, I'm good at researching and learning how to do different things. And those started to paint the picture that I might be a good treasurer or financial director. And so I took on that role, even though I didn't know much about the financial side of a nonprofit, but it allowed me to learn new skills. So now I do know about when it's okay to write tax receipts and how to issue them and so on. But I also got to apply some of the skills that I got from engineering. So it's a nice way to get this kind of synergy where you can apply what you do know while learning what you don't know. So that's just something, when you're forming a team, I challenge you to consider a little bit. What do you want to get out of it for yourself, and what do you want to contribute? Now let's get to that last mythical kind of part about team chemistry. Oh, this slide is weird, it does that. Okay, so this is why we had you take a look at that human metrics personality assessment out ahead of time. So hopefully you had a chance to do that. And if you're comfortable, I would like to see, there's a 4-letter type you got. If you've done that type into the chat and share that with everybody. As I'm sharing my screen, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to see it, but I'd love to see people share that if they know what their type is. It's equivalent to the Myers-Briggs type assessment, more or less, the one that we sent out. All right, I see them flowing in here. So I'll share with you what the typical engineer is. So what this means is that there's a better than average chance that if you meet an engineer, they are this personality type. Now that doesn't mean that everybody is this type who's an engineer, certainly. And we know that there's a lot of different engineers out there. I'm one of them. But the typical engineer is introverted. They're either sensing or intuitive. That's actually kind of a split. They're thinkers and they're judgers. So what does that mean? So if you were to meet an engineer on the street, or if the profession were to be one person, they would be an ISTJ or an INTJ. So engineers tend to be introverted, meaning they recharge on their own and they'll work on their own if at all possible. They're thinkers, so they're very analytical, which makes a lot of sense. And we have a lot more judgers who like to plan their life and stick to the plan, and they're very structured and organized that way, as to where perceivers are more free-flowing and able to take life as it comes. And feelers are more able to just make decisions based on emotion and are generally more empathetic. And I just like to point this out, that it's almost a 50-50 split between sensing and intuition. And sensing is really looking at the world as it is and understanding how it works. And intuition is seeing the things that don't exist yet, the imagination, that creativity, for example. And engineers tend to be right down the middle, 50% are one and 50% are the other. And that makes a lot of sense when you think about what engineering is, right? We have to see the world and understand how it works. We also have to imagine the unthought of, the impossible perhaps, and how do we bridge those two? So it's kind of interesting that that's a typical engineer, and if that's not you, that's more than okay. But something to understand is, it would be nice if we were all one type, right? And we could just all work together and totally be almost psychic and understand what we're each thinking. But as Sean pointed out, more robust and better outcomes come from diverse teams. And we know that now. That's not really up for debate. But it's more work. It's more difficult to work with people who are different than us. They challenge us. They make us scratch our heads and go, is that person crazy? Why don't they look at this the same way that I do? And so it's important to know who your teammates are and what their personality type might be, because it allows us to better understand one another. And something that a lot of people don't recognize is how we define success as a team can be different for each person. So yes, we all want to get a product to market, make a lot of money, change the world for the better. Like, no one's going to debate what our overall goal is or how we would define success. But there are sub-outcomes that are very different for different personality types. And it's really quite defined by these bottom four, whether you're a thinker, a feeler, or a judger, or a perceiver. And so getting a project done is great. That's success. But if it's not done on time, it's not done on budget, the judging personality is not going to view that as an actual victory. They are going to feel that they have failed in a lot of ways. On the other hand, a perceiver might be very comfortable with that outcome, but if it was a very rigid and boring project where there wasn't a lot of excitement, a lot of drama, they're going to feel like that wasn't necessarily a success either. Likewise, if you think about thinkers, if they don't have an opportunity to display their competence and really show off their skill set, the project could be successful, but they're not going to feel as fulfilled. As to where feelers, if you have a team where there's a lot of unresolved conflict and everybody's, kind of against each other and things aren't working well, it doesn't really matter what the outcome of the project is, the feeler is going to feel like you failed. So it's important to understand there's different motivations in place. And this can all seem really quite hidden because we don't naturally tend to understand people who are different than us. So the key here is to communicate and actually clearly define our expectations of what success looks like to us as a team, to each member of a team. And the way we do that is simply by communicating. And that communication is it's so important to defining your team and figuring out who's filling what role and having that all laid out. And so what I want to present to you quickly is just a list of communication mistakes that are very common based on this typical engineering type. And they're not, if you're a different personality type and you're different in all three of these, that's okay because you've been through an engineering education, most of you, and that can be a way of learning communication mistakes that are not something you would naturally do. So I'm just going to present a few of these, and I'd like you to think about interactions you've had where maybe you've experienced some of these mistakes or you've been the one perpetrating them. And, we often hear about how engineers are poor communicators. We hear that within the profession. We hear that from outside the profession, certainly. And I would argue that we're actually fantastic communicators. We are very good at communicating with each other in an engineering way. When we have to step out of that silo, that's where we get stuck, and we can often get caught doing some of these things that I'm going to show you here. And I've just isolated at the end of each point a letter. So which personality aspect that's most closely associated with. It doesn't mean that all people who have a J do these things, but it means it's more common. So see if you can recognize some of these, and feel free to put in the chat, yep, I've done that. So the first one is being closed-minded to change. Now this is a judger thing, but this is something we kind of learn in engineering when we start getting into project management. And so of course, you're all interested in creating change and being entrepreneurial. But even when we do that as engineers, we come up with a plan, right? And we say, this is the plan, and that's our baseline. And we always manage the project against that baseline, whether it's the schedule, it's the budget, whatever it is. And when we start to get closed-minded to anything that can change as we go along, we start to basically shut down conversations that bring interesting opportunities. So if you're really set in your ways and you want to stick to the plan and someone points out very rightfully things are not going according to plan, or there's an opportunity to shift and do something more effectively, more efficiently, if you're really closed-minded to that, you'll shut down that conversation very quickly. And when you do that too many times, you stifle innovation. You stifle people coming to you saying, we'd like to try this. And so that can set up this negative loop. The next one, which is also a judger, common thing that the judging personalities do is taking on martyrdom and complaining about it. So we've all had this team member, and maybe you've been guilty of being this team member in the past. I know I have, and we do this as engineers a lot. We think there's one right way to do something, and that's the only right way. And so when things aren't done up to our standards, what do? We do them ourselves, right? We do them ourselves, and then we complain about it. And that creates this terrible negative cycle. So you might have found yourself in that role, or you might have known a group member who's done that. And it didn't matter what you did, it wasn't good enough, or they just went out and kind of did their own thing and didn't really consult you on that. And that is a straight ticket to team failure. So another one that's very common for engineers, and this is typical of thinking personalities, but this is just something about the way we've learned to problem solve as engineers, is being overly critical. So as engineers, we are taught to find the problem, isolate it, and solve it, right? Understand it and solve it. And so often we forget that other people, especially outside the profession, are excited about an idea, right? They've come to us with a great idea. And if we immediately start picking it apart and poking holes in it and finding all the mistakes and problems, people are going to stop coming to us with those good ideas, right? People will actually find a way to work around you if you're overly critical and too negative. So it's important that, as engineers, yes, we have to be analytical and we have to find the issues with things, but it's important to reframe the problems you see as being positive, as opportunities to improve, and to frame it that way when you communicate that to people. The other one I wanted to point out that we as thinkers and engineers tend to do sometimes is living in your head. So that's where you're just thinking and you're not communicating at all. And that can be an issue because communication becomes an afterthought. So when you live in your head too much, oftentimes you go off on tangents or work on specific things, and nobody knows you're doing that until it's too late, right? And things have gone off in different directions. It's a total communication breakdown. And this is just something that thinkers, and introverted thinkers specifically, love to do. And it's not bad. Great ideas come out of this, but we have to also proactively and concurrently communicate what we're working on. Otherwise, we might as well just be off on our own, right? What's the point of the team? The one I don't have on here, I just wanted to bring up, it's a perceiver trait, but it's really just, it comes up all the time, is interrupting. And I just thought I'd mention that one after watching the US presidential debate last week. Interrupting is a huge communication faux pas. And then we don't tend to have a lot of feelers in the engineering profession. That's not to say there are none, but they are definitely a minority. But this is one that we need to be aware of because there are a lot of feelers out in society in general. And feelers can take things too personally. So this is not about communicating. This is about receiving communication, how we perceive things. And feelers will take things personally. As engineers, I think, generally speaking, we're quite good at separating criticism of an idea or a concept from criticism of the person. However, a lot of people are not good at that. And so any type of criticism that we levy as an engineer might be taken very personally by other people. And we can't change how they react and how they perceive things, but we can keep in mind that they might be a little more sensitive to any sort of criticism or feedback we give them than we might be if we're a thinker. So it's just to be aware that everyone hears things a little bit differently and to give a little imaginative forethought to how your communication will actually be received. So again, that comes where it's knowing your audience. Who are you talking to? And so if you know these types of personality traits, whether you've got judgers or thinkers or feelers in your group, it helps you to know how you'd want to communicate within that group and what sort of roles people might want to take on. So this understanding of ourselves is it's core, it's central to building a strong team. So just as a summary or recap, the 4 sort of quadrants are the things to keep in mind when forming your team. What is the area of interest? Because if you're not working on the same thing, well, why are you working together as a team? What preferred roles does everybody have? Is everybody comfortable with the role they've taken on, and do they feel supported to actually be able to operate in that role? The skill set. What skills do your different team members bring, and what skills do they hope to get out of it? Is there an opportunity to shadow somebody? You might not be an expert in business law, so you bring in somebody to take that role, but you know that someday you'd like to be able to fill that seat yourself. So how do you shadow, how do you work with your experts to develop those skill sets while actually executing on a project, maybe in another area? And of course, that team chemistry. How do you bond? How do you gel? How do you go through the stages of team formation in a productive way, manage conflict, navigate conflict out ahead of it forming, and really build a strong team that's focused on the project, not on each other necessarily. So there, we flew through a lot of stuff. This could be a 3-4 hour seminar and really get into it. But hopefully that gave you a little bit of insight into some of the key things to consider when forming a team and when you're meeting people throughout this week and connecting with them. Look for some of those things. Look for who they are as a person, how they like to communicate, how they like to be communicated with, what sort of skills are they hoping to bring to the table. People love to feel appreciated and feel like they're making a difference. So that's all central to building up this great team. And we saw how important that great team is to the success of any project, but certainly to any entrepreneurial endeavor. So I know we're a little tight for time, so I won't won't necessarily pause for questions unless anyone has one right now. So I'm just, oh, now I can see the chat better. I just wanted to go through this. So we have, and I'm guessing just because of the topic for tonight, we have a lot of people who are not typical engineers. So we've got lots of extroverts. Oh, there's one INTJ, exactly what we'd expect, some ENTJs. So typical engineers, but a lot more extroverts. And I think there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with being an introvert. I would never say that in a room full of engineers anyway. But it's really neat to see how many extroverts we have here. So I think you're going to have a very positive experience working with each other and talking to each other and connecting and sharing ideas. Extroverts love that. They thrive on it. So I think you've got a great group of people here who are definitely going to be able to think outside the box and approach some things maybe given in a way an engineer would, given our training as engineers, but also in a way that an engineer might not think about, because we've got some very diverse interests here. Oh, and I wanted to point out, I've seen almost across the board, almost ends, yeah, across the board, intuitive rather than sensing. So a lot of imagination, a lot of dreamers here, and that makes a lot of sense when you think about it. So, thank you very much for contributing those personality types and sharing who you are. And if there's any immediate questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will pass it back over to Tate.
Great. Thank you, Joe. That was really good. It's really foundational for you to have this type of teamwork ability to actually work together. And it's really good to see you're all non-typical engineers in some ways. When I graduated from engineering school and when pursued different career options, and also when I did my continuing education for my master in business administration, a funny thing is nobody actually think I was an engineer based on how I behaved. So in many ways, I think first principle apply, but you learn a lot of skills and you learn how to think like an engineer. But I think the reason why you're here is you're seeking something that would combine the training you received from engineering with your personality. I understand that. I think if you continually challenging yourself and actually seek to do things you are prepared to do, I think you'll find a lot of fulfillment and you'll find a lot of success. We need people who are dreamers to change the world, and which a lot of you are. That's really good. So we're almost here for our home stretch for tonight. Our last speaker is Joe Gill. I think Joe is here.
Hey, Tate.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How about you?
Good, good. Sorry we're a bit late, and thank you for coming in. Joe has been great resources for the business law community for the collab, and his wealth of knowledge in how startups may become successful or may die in horrible death because of they didn't start it right. And the reason why I bring Joe here is actually I worked in a law firm in one of my previous life before, and I see firsthand is how important for companies to have their business lawyer with a lawyer involved. Maybe you don't need to pay a heavy lawyer bill, but then actually to have that mindset to know what are some discussions you have to have. When do you need to bring an actual lawyer to actually help you? When are the stages you can do it yourself? Even those awareness will help you to mitigate a lot of legal risks. And that's really one of the greater risks you may have, especially once you're starting to generate revenue, when people can sue you for damage, that become more of a problem. And many of you will be in a startup situation. You don't want to set up on too bumpy ground and dig a hole for yourself further down the way. So that's why Joe is here. He anyway, without further ado, I give you Joe Grill. He's gonna give us a really good presentation. Joe, like the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you, Tate, for that introduction. And before I switch over to the PowerPoint slide and kind of the rundown, I'll just give sort of a little brief background and whatnot. So I've been involved in we'll say, I've been a lawyer now for about 8-9 years or whatnot, practicing primarily in Saskatchewan. Of more interest is probably the last couple of years where I really fell into the Saskatchewan tech ecosystem and started following along with companies that, individuals and companies that would end up forming the baseline for collabs here in Saskatoon, and then later on companies and individuals who formed kind of the basis of Cultivator down in Regina. And for those not familiar, collabs obviously is the tech incubator located on the Innovation Place grounds at the U of S in the Concourse building. Cultivator is the Connexus Credit Union tech incubator located in Regina, in now the fanciest building in Regina. Really recommend checking it out if anybody gets a chance. So I kind of fell into that environment and started just hanging around with people enough that they finally gave in and said, well, this guy's been here long enough, so maybe we'll throw some legal work at him and see what happens. And so then became, kind of a tech lawyer du jour. Little bit of an interesting segue happened in 2018 where I actually joined into the business incubator Collabs itself and tried my hand at co-founding a legal tech startup, where I thought I was going to revolutionize lawyer-client interactions with kind of an interactive portal for creating documents. And then I had a long overdue conversation with my wife about abandoning my cushy lawyer gig 1 month before we were going to have our second child. And I wussed out, and here I am, stuck wearing vests again. But again, it was an interesting ride, gave me a differential perspective. And I think Joel in the prior thing, is one of his last comments, said that so different perspectives are everything. And I find that more and more, going out of your way to try and be multidisciplinary or be able to speak some of the language of the other people you're going to interact with, on both maybe a language and a technical basis, does you a lot of benefit. And so a lot of that tonight was about trying to demystify lawyers. I think we have a, not undeserved reputation for living in ivory towers and whatnot and being a little mysterious. But my hope was to kind of demystify some of that with the presentation tonight. So I'm going to start sharing my content here, and hopefully everybody will see my PowerPoint slide. Let's share this. Okay, and I'm going to just pull this up. Oh, where are we going here? Slideshow, perfect. Okay, so I'm hoping that people are seeing my PowerPoint slide at this point. If not, Tate will jump in and tell me something went horribly wrong. So let's go into this. Again, my aim is to kind of go quick through this. Part of the reason I gave the slides to Tate is there's a lot of information in here. I intentionally included hyperlinks to various things. We're not going to spend a deep level of time doing this because everybody's had a long day, and I'm going to try to hit the high points and maybe leave some time for some questions. So affectionately, I've given this presentation a few times, and I've decided to title it "A Million Ways to Legally Die in a Startup," maybe with a little bit of information from inspiration from "A Million Ways to Die in the West." This actually started as an MBA class presentation, then I started giving it to different groups of people. So concentrating on different things and moved from there. So that was the point. So maybe it's all about pitfalls and, as I use the term with my clients, pits of hell that you could fall in along the way. Every lawyer presentation has a disclaimer. Basically, these are my views on things. The information's general. If you want actual legal advice, go and talk to an actual lawyer. But the last slide does get into personal opinion, so I really do need to cover the other one. Don't impute my somewhat radical ideas to my partners. Little about me, we already covered it. Lawyer in residence for Collabs. I advise some companies and board member on some other organizations people may have heard of, counsel. My wife bought me a mug years ago that had Charlie Brown on it, and I think the last thing says snazzy dresser. So, I get flack for wearing vests in my basement, but here I am. I have eaten 90 oysters in one sitting before, so I absolutely love those things. And yes, I'm not, I think amateur is over gracious, but I did join a parkour class about 2.5 years ago with some friends and learned how to jump off walls and do some stuff that is not anywhere near what American Ninja Warrior is. But anyways, it was an entertaining little time, and I didn't break anything. That was the biggest thing out of it. I didn't manage to break any bones. So it was wonderful. So let's diving into it. I should have had a slide for the introduction, but we'll just kind of get straight into the issues. And the slides themselves are going to cover a number of different things, and we'll just kind of try to hit on some of the major legal points you should consider when you're starting a business. So the first one's obviously human beings, the squishy, hopefully malleable individuals you bring along with you, and how you interact with them. And I mean, one of the major points that can come on board outside of your founding group is, are you contracting individuals? Oh, sorry, I think I'm getting a little feedback from somebody, but are you contracting individuals or are you hiring individuals? And that has a lot of repercussions, and we could spend a lot of time talking about that, but suffice to say, when bringing individuals on board for the first time for compliance reasons, typically contractors are preferred, but I'll put a big old asterisk and say, watch out for some government grants. And we get into a slide on this later. There are certain government grants that will require you to have employees. And, you know, when we talk about the raising capital slide, government grants are great. There's a whole bevy of them, which can be sort of non-dilutive capital to, you know, fire your engines of your company, but just be aware of that. A big one, you know, we're talking to a room full of engineers, intellectual property assignment. Thankfully, we've got some default rules under our IP laws in the country that if you're an employee or you hire an employee and they do some work for you, that your company owns the IP, but you still want to watch for that. The impression of owning something more, and this is a tough one because you're really jazzed up and you're hiring people and you need that, you know, salesperson or that developer or that other engineer to sort of bring on the team, and you start talking to them in terms of like, we're partners, or, you know, I'm going to give you 20% of the company or something, and you haven't really thought it through. Be very careful about that. There's a lot of cases where people have gotten in trouble for doing that. And I can think of at least one piece of court action from last year where somebody was to be just a minority shareholder in a company, but they actually referred to their other, quote, individual they brought in as a partner in an Instagram post of all places. And that actually became the basis for like us fighting back and forth with another law firm in town for like 3 months. So we were ultimately successful, but like it cost time and money. So just be careful with that. I bring up non-competition and non-solicitation because, you know, we see these at times. Somebody joins in with a particular company, and if they leave, you want to try and stop them from walking out the door or competing against you. It's pretty easy to stop people from not leaving with your proprietary information. It's a lot tougher to stop them from earning a livelihood. So you see this thing at times where they're like, you'll never work in tech for 10 years after you leave. I have it written there, the bag of money rule. Unless you're giving them a big old bag of money, that's probably unenforceable. And everybody's favorite one in tech, and we'll cover a little bit of in raising capital, stock options and equity grants. Okay, I have a new startup and I'm like most people, I have limited resources, I'm bootstrapping it, I'm not independently wealthy. So I offer shares. And that's a great way to incentivize people. But people make all sorts of stupid deals when it comes to offering shares. And they they give away the farm too early, because consider it's like a marathon, not a sprint in terms of a business or even trajectory with high performing technology companies. You need to save room on your cap table, your ownership structure, for people who are going to give you money later, like other investors, as well as employees. And if you give away half the company from day one, well, you know, where's everybody else coming in later? And you might find yourself in a scenario where you sell this great successful company 5-10 years down the line, and you don't make that much money because you gave away the farm. And rewarding people who actually perform, they don't just participate. There's no, participation ribbon for startups. You're either a performing member of the team or you're out. I mean, and that might sound harsh, but that's essentially the mantra. I think that's quite pervasive. So don't just give people equity because they happen to be hanging out and they liked you or were a big fan. Founder rules of the game. Again, this is just, we're talking about forming teams here. You're going to join in with some individuals, and you want to be careful that everybody understands the rules of the game. So if you co-found a company, there's 3 co-founders. How are you splitting up? First off, how are you splitting the equity as far as the share distribution? And I've got a reference here to this founders website. I actually really recommend everybody who's forming a team and thinking about ownership, check that link out. It basically makes you answer about 15 questions and then it gives you a proposed breakdown of ownership of a company. So I will tell all the founders that I get as clients, like, go off separately, all do this, and then compare notes. And you might get a good idea then of where your ownership should be. But then once you're done that, you need to now decide, how does decision-making work? If it's a one-man or woman show, that's easy. If it's two, that's probably the most difficult, because who wins the day if you butt heads? Do you have a tiebreaker? Do you have an independent person who's going to solve those issues? Do each of you sort of have your own fiefdoms in terms of, I'm a subject matter expert and I'm a technical expert? If you're 3+, it's a little bit easier because you can usually go majority rule, but there might be some stuff that you want unanimous. So decision making, or the rules of engagement are really important to go through. And I provide a link to some sample things to think about under shareholders agreements. And then the last one is just some publicly available examples. Look, I'll provide the disclaimer. It's always better to actually talk to a professional advisor and get something good for you. But the quality of stuff online has been getting better, and actually a lot of incubation hubs and incubators throughout the world have been making documents publicly accessible, or almost like open sourcing documents, so we could create kind of a consistent framework for something like an equity raise or whatnot. So Mars is an innovation zone out in Toronto. They have kind of a public library of some documents, which I know were vetted by half-assed decent lawyers. But again, just to give you some sense on things. I'm not saying those are perfectly suited for you, to be very clear, but might give you an idea on things. Raising money. So again, we could spend 2 hours talking about raising money. I gave a presentation for Innovation Place about a month ago on this, and it was a similar thing. But generally speaking, in the beginning, you're probably looking to a combination of high net worth individuals, angel investors, and maybe your family. A lot of people will go to family members and say, hey, I need some money to run my new great idea. Do you want to invest? Obviously, you have to navigate family relationships so you don't have a very awkward Christmas. But you're probably going to be with this term, accredited investors. It's a legal term, but it really refers to, think of it like high net worth individuals. So there's some ways you can qualify for that. The most notable are, you have $1 million in liquid financial assets, or you made over $200,000 in the last 2 years if I pulled your tax returns. But again, those tend to be it. In the tech ecosystem here in Saskatchewan, we tend to find that very early stage companies are getting funded by a combination of family money and then angel investors, so high net worth individuals who take big risks on extremely early stage, like even pre-revenue companies. And then after that, you sort of get into the fund kind of category, where you have parties like the Connexus Venture Capital Fund, Westcap, Tribune Capital, the Broad Street Bulls, PIC Investments. I mean, there's a few other ones in there. And they'll start getting involved sort of later on, once maybe you're closing in on $1 million in revenue a year, although some will kick in a couple 100,000. Forms of investment. So there are lots of different ways. So you sort of think, okay, I know I want to get investment and I want to give up part of my company, but what do I actually do? So I'm not going to delve into each of those in depth. It's a long conversation, but here's the key: is when you're an early company, it's really difficult to value yourself reasonably. And so that's why these things like convertible notes and safes came into the world. The idea was, I'm an investor, I like your business idea, but I've got no earthly idea what you're worth, and I got no earthly idea what my, $100,000 that I'm going to put into your company should be worth, percentage-wise. So we and you will agree that my $100,000 will turn into shares, actual ownership with a percentage, at some later point. Usually when the company has done a bigger raise round, say like a raise round for proceeds of at least $1 million or something. The theory is this: at the point in time that we do the big raise round later, when they convert, we'll have other sophisticated parties involved. The company will be more mature, might have a better track record than some metrics to build on. And we will then be able to have some, better reasonable guess about what the value of the company is. So these are really good for kicking the can down the line if you can't come up with value, but also be aware of them. There's a lot of articles out there about people getting royally screwed by using notes and safes. And it's because they made horrible deals early on when it was easy to do so. And then my 100,000 turned into, 50% of your company, which is not good. Again, there's some resources here in terms of, a look at common documents like these safes and everything, pitch decks for actually how you raise capital. We could run a whole presentation on that. And then just keeping organized. In the beginning, it's pretty easy. You open up an Excel spreadsheet and you're like founder A, B, C, and we own this many shares and then percentages, but it'll get more complicated over time. These are some decent services that as the business gets more complicated, you could use. I've got some simpler ones. I don't mind too, like specifically with cap tables, because I think people do them so horribly. Like if anybody actually wants one after the fact, I can send a sample one to Tate and he can circulate it around. Just because I find online it's either just abject garbage or it's just way too complicated for, say, the stage we're talking about here. And finding money, talked about this, grants. Everybody likes grants. If I can recommend you do nothing else, go on the Innovation Saskatchewan website and go look up this running list of funding options for different grants for technology companies. And again, it's not just tech. I'd say research focused companies are also in there. One laughable thing I will say too, not that maybe the government of Canada is the best purveyor of apps, although their COVID app isn't bad. There is an app that you can download called, basically it's the Canada Business app, and it's actually not bad for finding government grants. I didn't list it in here, but it kind of covers a full gamut of all the grants available at the provincial, municipal, federal level and whatnot. So it might be worth a download. I've got a few links here of kind of a few big ones we see regularly. IRAP is, again, a very common form of funding, whether it's for hiring individuals and paying part of their salaries or for building out a project. They're also pretty good too in that they provide they try to push people at times to get away from just pure grant money and say, hey, we'll actually link you up with an expert or something like that. So that's one as well. This one in the middle, the technology startup incentive, was a huge boom for the tech sector here in the province. As you can see, it gave a 45% tax credit to people who invest in early stage tech companies. So the key there is that there's a registration process. So if you're going to go get money from an investor and you're trying to say, hey, a 45% tax credit seems pretty good, right? You want to make sure you're actually registered to do that. And then scientific research experimental development credits have been around for forever. They're also nice because in a lot of instances, they're refundable, which is a big deal because likely when you start the business up, you'll make no money, but you'll spend a lot of money. And so it would be nice to be able to recoup those monies. IP. So this is a big one, obviously, when it comes to tech or anything physical, hardware, software, etc. I provide a little bit of a table here to kind of show you the different types of IP. And again, we could really get into weeds on this. There's some examples in there of like what might be a patent versus an industrial design versus a copyright versus a trademark versus a trade secret. In the world of coding and whatnot, we see a lot under the copyright angle or people just determined to do a trade secret. Just so you know, we see a lot of people look at pursuing registration of their IP, but some just adopt this like, I will make the best widget out there and I will tell no one. And that has been a valid strategy in other industries. The Coke recipe famously is not subject to any registration. It's just nobody knows what it is apparently. But there is registration of certain things required. One big thing I would say here is just this CIPO website, the Canadian Intellectual Property Office. Again, it's go on there and spend some time searching out information around your startup or your name or what you're proposing to do, because you don't want to spend all this time and effort to find out somebody's already got that idea or that name you really like just locked up under a trademark or a patent or something else. So there's some interesting stuff. I know when I took IP law in law school, we spent like an entire class searching stupid things on the patent registry because our IP prof liked searching things like death lasers and death stars. And, I think he was obsessed with like futuristic weapons of mass destruction, but it's really intriguing to see what is on there. And I mean, it can be very helpful. So you don't just spend all this time and then run into an IP issue. So Big thing there. I'll reiterate again from my earlier slide, like if you're going to be involved in a team and you're going to, incorporate a company or set up, make sure you're getting IP assignments, because people will presumably do the work and you want it to belong to the company or your venture partnership, whatever it is. Not so that they can disappear later, and then if you make some money, they'll pop out of the woodwork and say, oh, you owe me $10 bajillion or something. Data protection. This was actually a new slide that I added for this presentation, but it's becoming like such a huge issue. Over the weekend, I was involved with the MedHack organization for their annual hackathon, and this was pretty much the only issue that came up during the whole weekend at the hackathon. It was, how do we deal with privacy legislation, because it scares us and it's ugly and it's pervasive. And yeah, it's true, particularly if you're going to operate outside of Canada. I've got a file on my desk with a Saskatchewan-based startup that started getting, some overtures from Belgium, and that's cool, and they want to sell over there, but they're running into the ugly GDPR, the General Data Protection Rule, because they would be selling to EU data subjects, so to speak. So there's a lot of rules around this, and I mean, the big takeaway I would say is, again, I provide a link here to the Privacy Commissioner of Canada's website on business matters. Understand that portion. If you're going to be curating and collecting any data, if you're, mining data sets that are publicly available, or you're going to ask users to input their information and you're going to use that for particular purposes, you need to care about this. I mean, it's rare that somebody is just saying, we're just used information to verify your access to a particular application, and then we didn't store anything afterwards. That's pretty rare. That seems to be what the Privacy Commissioner would love, but it's not, commercially feasible. But there are a lot of parameters and walls you kind of have to put in place when it comes to curating information. It's 10 times worse if you're dealing with, health information or, more sensitive financial information. So watch out for that. A lot of this kind of rubber hits the road with privacy policies in terms of service. And in terms of service or terms of use. That link that link right there, the IU Bendo one, is a bit of an odd one for me to be giving up, because I think most lawyers would say, of course, you need to pay us oodles of money to go and do privacy policies in terms of use. And look, I'm a believer in, there's a point in time for everything. And, you will get to a point where you probably need something more robust. But I have had clients use this service to generate privacy policies in terms of service. And quite frankly, the ones from that website weren't bad. I'll, self-servingly say mine are better, but, I'm also not going to discount that there's some decent stuff out there, nor am I going to discount people operate on a budget. So something's better than nothing. And my last one down there is just data security best practices or something. I particularly like that first one. And, again, not everybody will obviously be involved in just a SaaS or pure software thing, startup. There probably will be a hardware element to many startups that people in this room may start. But this security checklist I like, because it kind of broke down security measures based on the stage of the business. So it was kind of like, look, you will need these eventually, but for now, based on kind of the revenue trajectory you're at, this is what you should consider. So there's some kind of baselines there. Getting organized, again, this is just a simple one. At a certain point, you'll want to probably incorporate the company. If for no other reason, then you can't issue shares and you can't access a lot of government grants if you don't have a corporation incorporated. That link up there is just to the Information Services Corporation corporate registry. So that's the website where you actually incorporate. What I would say for a lot of people too, is that before you're kind of at that point, if you're just having discussions, but you're not sure how serious this venture is, and you're kind of like, I don't want to pay the money to incorporate and then have to deal with turfing the company, getting at least in place something called a founder agreement is probably a good idea. So that would kind of lay out, if we did incorporate later, how would we split up the company and how do we make decisions? Kind of steals from that shareholders agreement stuff I talked about before. Again, if anybody's interested in kind of a stock founder agreement template, because I think that might be of use to people at this stage, again, I'm happy to push that through Tate, and then you could see from there. I list some other stuff in terms of registrations and whatnot, but we won't necessarily get into it in the interest of time. Global, again, this is kind of a potpourri of other issues. Look, if you're going to be bringing in individuals from out of country to work. Obviously, immigration matters will come into play. Same thing with tax. That can also apply more commonly with, you know, I've got a client last week, we were talking about this. They want to basically contract a developer based down in Florida to do some work for them. And so had some conversations around, you know, do you have to comply with US tax laws? What does that kind of look like? Just be aware on there. Oh, sorry, I just saw a question came in. I'll just answer it quick. Ethan, I provided the slides to Tate, and we'll make sure we provide them in the aftermath as well for everybody. So we will kick those out. Again, tax, it can start to matter when you're getting into different countries and that type of thing. Different countries are taking interesting tax on like tech companies that don't have a physical presence. So the European Union is kind of an interesting one. Some US states have adopted these almost like minimum revenue thresholds. So until you're actually doing business over, I don't know, $500,000 or something, then you don't really have to worry about it. But just watch that. There's going to be some element of it. That last one down there is actually an interesting one too. The Global Startup Ecosystem Project is like this, I think it was originally called the Startup, I think it still is, the Startup Genome Project. It's a very well-researched, ongoing thing to sort of find, you know, where is the best place on earth for startups, and provides a lot of information on there about different like cities, locales that might be good for certain types of business. So funny enough, even like Edmonton and Calgary are listed in there. I think clearly Regina and Saskatoon need to get themselves on this list. But like if you pull up Edmonton, it'll kind of talk about the general revenue of companies operating in there, what sort of sectors are hot in Edmonton, you know, any government incentives associated with it. So it's actually really neat kind of annually updated report to take a peek at if you're, you know, if you were considering a move, for instance, or just trying to attract talent from certain areas. And then this one, again, this funny enough, though, we rapid fired through legal issues. I think one of the things I like including, and the reason I included this with the MBA class, was I'm not trying to turn people into lawyers through this presentation. You want to issue spot, you know, the slides we walked through before kind of hit on some major points that I think people should give consideration to, and, you know, things you will have to work through as you're building a startup. But more importantly, you should understand, you know, the market for professionals. And I think a lot of these comments could equally apply to accountants and other professionals as well as lawyers. But, you know, understanding how the sausage is made can make you a savvy consumer. I raised the point here, the first bullet point about value-based billing, like know who's actually doing your work. Like there's a big difference between, you know, I need a stock employment agreement and I need a, you know, full white glove service, sell your business type of thing. I mean, we operate in our firm on who's the person, you know, what level of expertise is required and who's the best fit. I always sort of apply this concept from commercial realtors and valuators about highest and best use. Like my highest and best use is not to work on some very basic document. I provide a lot more value to my clients on strategic level thinking, or, you know, large, ridiculous legal issues that nobody wants to think about. And we'll get a lot of document creation and other stuff down to associates. When you're even just paying, we love falling back under the billable hour. Like I'm a lawyer, my billable hour is $1 million an hour. It's a couple $100 an hour. It's $1,000 an hour. More and more, I think professionals should be challenged to get into fixed fee pricing. So we scope out what you need, and then we will provide a cost associated with that. We may build in contingencies, but I mean, I always personally found it a bit odd that you went to this person who was an expert and you said, okay, I need your help for this really big, this thing that matters deeply to my company. And I say, well, okay, I'm $500 an hour and it'll take what it's going to take. And then you go, but presumably you've done this before, so you should have an idea how much it will cost. And I go, you know, that's the vagaries of things. It could be anywhere. So pushing people on numbers, I think, is important. Documents, again, what do you actually need? Like, it's a risk assessment spectrum. Like, do you need something off the rack or do you need bespoke? can you get by with some template documents that you fill out, or do you need something like really well curated out there? And that's why I talk about online resources. Again, there's some not bad stuff out there on the internet. My own billing philosophy and the way that we've run our startup package within our office has been around trying to empower clients with free templates and kind of guidance and resources with them. And then if they need it, talk about actually charging them for something more bespoke. But, you know, that's a risk assessment and is also based on how much money you want to throw at legal. Market knowledge, very important thing if you're hiring any professional. You know, we'll all come out of law school understanding the laws. We won't all come out of law school understanding the market. So you want somebody who understands the ecosystem. You know, do they know the relevant movers and shakers in that place? Do they have an understanding of kind of the market terms? That can save you a lot of money. Like if somebody rolls into a deal and they don't understand that, I don't know, the convention on a convertible note financing is that they never trigger unless it's a $500,000 threshold, which is kind of common at the lower end, by the way. Fighting over that number is just going to rack up bills. Legal technology, you should force your lawyers to try to get with the 21st century. For instance, I use the amazing and groundbreaking software DocuSign to sign documents, and I get praised for that. And I find it ridiculous because like e-signatures are not something new, and yet we still like printing off paper and getting people to sign them. I mean, we may as well just pull out the quill and ink at this point, call it a day. But you know, ask about automation, ask about DocuSign, ask about leveraging AI. And then the last one about blogs. There's a lot of good information out there, to be honest. A lot of law firms, I think, you know, almost give away too much as far as the DIY on it, but you can learn a lot from reading that. I include that last one. I really actually think business incubator websites, one in particular from the US called Y Combinator, is a great resource for just understanding startup philosophy and issues of concern, and does trench into legal issues as well. So there's a lot of information you can find out there on these topic points as part of it. And we were rapid firing, but I wanted to not stay on for an obscene amount of time. Final thoughts. So why do I have Minesweeper? I've always viewed my role as preventing you from blowing up, legally speaking, along the way. You might fail for any number of reasons. You fail to generate traction. You never had market fit in the first place. You ripped off an idea that's already commercialized. You are a generally disagreeable human being and you cannot get along with other human beings. I can't control those, but I can control you getting disqualified on a technicality. And legal's expensive. I mean, if you get into a big issue, it can cost lots of money. And courts, you know, kind of the end game for most early stage, not end game, but it will end the startup for most early stage startups. The costs are getting into the tens of thousands of dollars, and it's not a useful way to go about doing it. So it's always for me about empowering my founders to be able to at least spot some issues as they go along the way. Like I said, I'm not expecting anybody to become a lawyer. Like that's why we hire experts. The same way that surely no one should have an expectation that I am an engineer or a software developer, but I work with people who have that expertise as my clientele, and I try to at least be curious and understand what they are talking about and how to translate their concerns into my world. So, you know, it really is about trying to get to the end and not blow yourself up in the process. And with that lovely comment at the end, there we go. I will, and of course I'm like going ahead. I'd be happy to answer any questions from anybody.
Joe, maybe I'll jump in here and ask a quick question.
Sure.
Just a question about these kind of your like off the shelf versus bespoke tailored documents. Have you run into any problems with like companies or clients using online documents or kind of off the shelf TOSs or anything like that? Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. It's situational, Andrew, and I think it's primarily around, if something requires a lot more nuance to it, then it's probably something we need to be careful about off the shelf. Like, for example, I'll use a non-disclosure agreement. Yes, there's nuance in an NDA, but I mean, they're largely all the same. There's a lot, there's a lot of the bulk of most NDAs you find really from places all around the world that, looks about the same in terms of coverage and whatnot. So, there's one there. One that I see people all the time running into problems with are software development agreements, actually, because I don't know if it's just, I wouldn't actually say it's so much a legal issue. It's just that the agreements people pull off the internet do not do a good job as to defining scope and deliverables. So people get in, fights about all the time saying, you didn't actually define what you were building for me or what the specs were for this app that I asked you to build out, or, what the milestones were for payments along the way. And some of that is just, it's kind of a quasi issue, right? There's legalities to it, but somebody didn't spend the time thinking through all the different steps of building an app, for example, and where friction points might arise, or, there might be a delivery of some beta, and then there should be a process for remediation of issues afterwards. So people don't, some of it is a failing to sort of really think through the granular parts of that relationship. But I mean, just as a general comment, I do think some of the stuff that we're seeing online is getting better than it used to be. It's not a substitute for actual legal advice, but I mean, I also kind of, my startup experience has kind of put me in a weird place from risk tolerance. I mean, lawyers are bred, if you will, to not accept any risk. 0.001% risk is bad. An individual pursuing a tech startup will take a shot at it if it has even, a 5% chance of success. So there has to be this adjustment of expectations, I think, in the marketplace. And I mean, I'm always careful to say, look, here's some templates. It's to help you along the way, because we can't afford to really draw these out on a bespoke basis, but there'll be at least a good protection in the intermediary as part of it. So I think it's about trying to strike a balance. And I mean, professionals have found a hard time doing that historically.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you so much, Joe.
The other comment I'll just make too, because I think I wanted to try and draw a line back to one of the last slides in Joel's presentation about teams and different personalities. The one slide in there, that founders with an R website, if you are forming teams, again, I said this before, I really encourage everybody to do that. It is a really interesting thing to see what it pops out as far as a percentage ownership allocation of your startup. And a lot of the questions are really qualitative versus quantitative. And so if you have a 2-person, 3-person, whatever person team, I really do encourage you all to do that, and then to put in the answers and kind of see where it works out. I know, like myself, when I worked on my tech startup, me and my co-founder did it, and luckily we both ended up with the same answer, which was good. It would be really interesting if we hadn't, but sometimes it's just tough because you don't know what kind of variables should go into the ownership allocation question. And keep in mind, it'll probably change. Like in my experience, it was different too, because my co-founder really was putting almost a full-time effort into the development of our startup, whereas I was still very much, full-time lawyering and, committing weekend time, evening time and whatnot. So, if I had quit and thrown myself fully at it, the equity allocation would have changed. But that's just a general point on ownership later on.
Joe, I think that's a really good point. So with the corner equity, like what would be your suggestion for these guys as they move forward for this week? And on what stage would you recommend them starting to think about the split?
Yeah, it's a good, you know, I don't think it needs to happen right away. I mean, if I think of my own experience, it was, we kind of had this, we started working and we had this implied understanding of equality in that, you know, it was, okay, it'll be 50-50 until somebody raises an eyebrow. That can kind of operate well in the beginning. I actually think what is more important and is something that I don't even think necessarily needs to get set down in a legal document is understanding roles and responsibilities and who will be given kind of the benefit of the doubt or the oversight of something within the startup. Because again, we're talking about a group of individuals who have similar expertise, but people will bring their own experiences to the table. And I really do think that if you're going to start up a business with somebody, you have to respect the expertise that they bring to the table. And you have to be willing to let their decision carry the day if you disagree with it. You should get into healthy disagreement. You should just not accept because they know what they're doing, that they have a certain designation or expertise to go with it. But I find in the beginning, to avoid founder disputes. Most founder disputes occur because of a mismatch of expectations or not managing them at all. So have those conversations. It doesn't need to necessarily go through every single thing in that, you know, I provided a checklist in there for a shareholders agreement. You may not necessarily need to go through all of that, but you should have these questions about, you know, governance, ownership, what happens when we bring investors on board. Because it's easy to just get lost in building, and it's important to focus on building. I'll also say that I don't think people who should spend an exorbitant amount of time thinking about necessarily the issues I brought up here, but failing to have the conversation will be very, let me put it this way, it'll be very difficult to have it when it matters. It's extremely easy to have a founder ownership conversation when it's early stage and it doesn't matter. It's extremely difficult to have a founder ownership conversation when you've got traction and there's real revenue on the table and the company might actually be worth something.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I think that's a good point. One of the experience I might have shared with some of the students before is my last startup company. We were doing well, making actually automated assembly lines. But one of the problems we had was we later on realized the more units of the machine we built, the more we sold it, the more it actually hurt one of our co-founders' business because it actually increased the capacity for his competitor to actually drive down the price. So he would rather have the product to himself rather than selling. So then that caused a lot of issues. So not only with the shareholder, you also need to discuss about the longer vision. What's the strategy they want to take? Do you want to actually work on a business for 20 years as a career, or do you want to look at 3-5 years growth and have a quick exit, and then move on to do something else? Having that conversation is also important. I know this is a lot of the different scenarios to take in, and some of you may not fully convinced that why we need to think about this. But when I was running a business, really my best friends was lawyer and accountant. When I'm not on the phone with my lawyer, I'm on the phone with an accountant, because you need to deal with those issues to actually keep the business viable. Someday I may share with you how when I was a lawyer, we represented Huawei in one of the major lawsuits about how someone infringes their patent rights, and then how that engineering knowledge and your logbook will all come in handy in doing those. But I think for tonight, this is has been wonderful. Joe has been very graciously presented us more on the legal basics, and I think what I will do is I have sent the slides from tonight into the Slack channel. If you haven't had a chance to sign up and go in there, please go in and introduce yourself and sleep on it, talk to your friends, and think about it. Tomorrow, we'll start looking into how to engage with customers and starting to look at how you can serve customers with your idea. And if you are still looking for teammates or if you're looking for a team, please go in there and communicate with each other. Joe, thank you so much for coming in tonight. I would actually enjoy, I actually invite you to join us in the Slack channel. I'll send you the link shortly.
Perfect. I'd be happy. I was going to say I'd be happy to join up. It might be an easier way too. I made a reference to potentially sharing some documents that I think might be useful to the group. So if you send me the link, I will join up.
Yeah, for sure. I'll do that right away. And then before I let everyone go, do anyone have any questions for me in terms of what's expected to the rest of the week? And I know some of you came in late, but basically I'll also have the recording ready. So if you want to go back and revisit some of the topics, it will be there. Tomorrow we'll talk about customer and we'll have the industry panel. And Wednesday we'll have the business session and the investor panel. Thursday will be our preliminary round for our pitch night. If you have any questions, please send in the chat or unmute yourself. Okay, seeing no questions, I will wish you all have a good evening. Thank you for showing up and tuning in. And I will be available to meet for chat throughout the days and throughout the week. So if you have any questions, send me a message either through email or through Slack channel. We can set up a quick call, and I'm happy to be here, support you in this journey and to Friday and then beyond. Have a good evening, everyone.